Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar Scaling Product Ownership presented by Lee Cunningham. Before we get started, I would like to review a couple of items. Please be aware that all of your lines are muted. If you have questions during the presentation, and we love to encourage questions throughout the presentation, please use the question feature on the control panel. Additionally, if you're having technical difficulties throughout the presentation, please use the chat function also on the right side of the control panel. The presentation will last approximately 35 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. Again, feel free to use the questions feature throughout the presentation, and we will get to as many as we can at the end. You will notice at the top of the control panel on the left-hand side, there's a button with double arrows. You can click this button to collapse the control panel during the presentation. We will be recording this event, and a link to the recording will be emailed to everyone within a few days of the webinar. Now I would like to introduce Lee Cunningham. Lee?
Thanks, Dan, and thank you everyone who is attending this seminar for choosing to spend an hour of your day with us. We're going to be talking about obviously scaling product ownership today. But before we get into that, just let me give you a little bit of information about myself. There we go. If you want to put a face with the voice, as the information that you've gotten beforehand indicates, I do work for VersionOne. So my role is that of as a coach and also a trainer for VersionOne. So I get the opportunity to spend a lot of time with some really neat, really smart folks all over the country and all over the world. I count you folks as part of that group today. Today we're going to talk about obviously scaling product ownership, but before we get into talking about scaling, I want to talk about the product owner role. Just do a real quick reset on that, and look at some anti-patterns, or which is another way of saying some bad practices that organizations are engaging in regarding the product owner. And the reason I want to talk about those is because it's going to be sort of a moot point to talk about scaling product ownership if the basics aren't there. So I want to cover those and make sure we're all on the same page, because when I say product owner, there are going to be some things that I'm assuming as I'm going throughout the discussion of the scaling. So first of all, looking at the product owner role, this is something that this role, I think, is probably, in my opinion, it's the most important role in a Scrum implementation. Product owner obviously is that customer role. So if you're not doing Scrum or you're doing some other some hybrid methodology, if you're doing an Agile, working according to an Agile project management approach, then you have this customer role in here. So product owner certainly is the Scrum implementation of that. But there's some things that are part of that role that don't necessarily get included in everybody's implementation of product owner. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of different groups every month, and some are doing a better job than others, but it's not uncommon to find the product owner role not very well implemented. And I think it's because the Scrum Master role is pretty well understood. Everybody knows what that is, because the Scrum Alliance has done a good job at publicizing that and getting people through Scrum Master classes. And as part of the Scrum Master classes, folks also get a good handle on what it means to be a team member. So if there are some good simulations that are done during the Scrum Master class, you'll get that as well. But the product owner role is sometimes there's not a lot of emphasis on that. So people have different ideas as to what that really entails. So I just want to, I'm certainly not going to read all of the bullet points here, but just looking at a few of these. The first one's really important here, is that the product owner, we're considering that product owner to be responsible for the profitability of the product or project. So if we're not talking about using Agile to manage a product over its lifetime, if we're using it to manage a project that has a definite, finite lifetime, still the same thing applies. The profitability and the ROI for things that are going on in that project are the responsibility of the product owner. There's also the responsibility to be available to the team and be able to communicate the vision and not just hand things off to the team and as kind of the business handing off to the team members and going away, but to be available for collaboration, not just at the beginning and not just at the end of sprints, but throughout the process. So sprint over sprint, release over release, being available to the team. The responsibilities there also is there to adjust features and priorities between sprints. So we certainly go into releases and we go into sequences of sprints with plans in mind, but we also realize that part of this is inspecting and adapting to changes. So the product owner is the primary driver as to, in terms of what's going to get done and when it's going to get done, the primary driver of all of those things. And then finally, the product owner here is responsible for participating in these meetings. So sprint planning, the daily scrums or daily stand-ups, the sprint reviews, even the retrospectives, we expect the product owner to be available and to be attending those, and then to accept or reject the work results that the team is actually delivering, the increment that's coming out of these sprints. So what makes a good product owner? That's something we should always consider when if we're talking about product owner or scrum master or team member or any other position we're trying to fill. You know, if we're trying to evaluate folks, is this person really a good candidate for this? Often the choice is made to just take an existing role and say, okay, everybody who's a product manager now, we'll make them product owners, or everybody who's of this role or that role, make them a product owner. And they're not always good candidates for that. Either there may be some personal predispositions, and maybe just some physical, geographical barriers that might not make that a good choice. So we certainly want to make sure the product owner is available to the team and actually enjoys being available and collaborating with the team. The product owner needs to have a good rapport with the customer, because this is really a kind of a duality of roles here. It's not just outward-facing, customer-facing, and then hand off to a business analyst type of role. And it's not all being available to the team and working with the team. It really comprises both of those things. So it's often a reality that there are folks that are helping the product owner, the named product owner, because there may be just too much to do. We're going to talk about that more a little bit later. We want to make sure that the product owner is somebody who's going to be not only willing but also able, in terms of other responsibilities inside the organization, to invest the time required to actually develop backlog items, groom the product backlog, and to be in sync with the team as much as possible. So again, some of these things are, when we're making these determinations, some of these things are personal attributes of individuals. Some people are better at this than others. Some people want to, some people don't want to. And other things have to do with how the organization might be set up. Some organizations will make steps towards adopting an Agile approach, but may not be really supportive of the product owner role in terms of being able to allow that individual, or those individuals, the time that's necessary to do this, because it is very involved and time consuming. We talked about ROI, return on investment, being one of the responsibilities of the product owner, and we're simply saying, if you look at the little formula at the top, you can boil that down to saying let's make more than we spend. That's really what we're talking about. So that's just economics 101. We do that in our daily lives. Nothing different here. We're trying to make sure that the present value of what we're going to be receiving, or the benefit we're going to be getting from whatever we're building or producing, is going to actually going to be positive when we subtract the cost of actually doing that work. So it's the product owner's responsibility, therefore, in working towards this, to determine what is it that's important, what is it that's going to provide the most benefit, because we certainly want to make sure that we're building things that are valuable and that are going to be something that our stakeholders, our customers, are going to want to consume. And we're also going to try to make sure that we're doing things in such a way that we're minimizing waste. And one of those things is kind of the counterpart to what I just mentioned, is make sure we're not building things that aren't important or aren't valuable, because those are going to consume financial resources consume time, and there's going to be an opportunity cost associated with those things, such that while we're doing things that are less valuable, we're not able to work on the things that are more valuable. That's why it's very important for the product owner to be involved in driving the boat in terms of prioritization. So some anti-patterns. These are things that I see quite frequently, and when I talk with my cohorts, folks that do essentially the same thing that I do in terms of coaching and working with teams, we see these patterns over and over again. One is just assuming default that product manager equals product owner. This is probably the most frequently translated role, if you will. Okay, well, we know who our Scrum Masters are, we know who our team members are as far as our developers and testers and technical writers and so forth. So in our organization, it looks like the product owner most closely resembles the product owner, so we'll make them the product owner. And the problem that can come up with in that situation is that instead of saying, okay, and now we're going to make you a product owner instead of being a product manager, what happens is now in addition to everything you're already doing as a product manager, we're going to put this product owner stuff on top of you as well. So we're just putting more things onto these people, and they legitimately just don't have the time or the bandwidth to handle the internal facing part of being a product owner. So on the other end of the spectrum, the assumption that a business analyst is a product owner. So business analyst a lot of times has that rapport with the team and has that contact with the team, but they don't have, generally speaking, don't have the authority to make binding decisions in terms of prioritization and you know what's going to be done and when it's going to be done. So there's, if you think about it, if I look at those two, in many cases what we see in terms of product ownership happening is a product manager type of role and analyst type of role working together very closely, and that's really going to be one of the first things we're going to talk about when we look at doing some scaling here in just a couple of minutes. Another anti-pattern is product owner by committee. So having instead of having a person on point who's going to be where the buck stops, making the ultimate decision, we have a committee of people. Now, this is not to say that the product owner should be working in a vacuum. The product owner certainly is going to be working with stakeholders, both internal and external, working with team members to get all the information, to get the best information, to make the best decisions possible. But what we're saying is that we're not trying to make sure we have consensus across 15 people, because what happens in those cases often is that when everybody's responsible, then nobody's responsible, and we end up not having good decisions made. Delegating prioritization to the team, and then this goes along with the last bullet point here of the business handing off to development, which is kind of a typical pattern in if we're talking about software development, at least, business handing off requirements to the development team and saying, well, here's the date, we got to have it all, you guys go away and get it done. And what happens in those cases is that the development team may choose to do some things first or do some things that are of less value in lieu of things that are more valuable. And essentially what we're doing is we're delegating business decisions and ROI decisions down to where it's not appropriate. It's not to say that team members aren't smart and that those folks they may have been around in the organization for a long time, but it's just not the appropriate place for those decisions to be made. So it actually puts the responsibility properly placed on the product owner to make those decisions. This is just a selection of some principles behind the Agile Manifesto. So you guys have probably seen the Agile Manifesto, and maybe you can quote it by heart. And it's very, very simple, just really 4 statements with a little bit of information around it. And then there's an accompanying document called the Principles Behind the Agile Manifesto, which puts some more meat on that kind of skeleton, that philosophical skeleton. And this is just a selection of these that I think that applies. So I won't read through all of these. But the one that I do want to look at is the third point down here, is that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. And that's the piece that really sometimes becomes overlooked and maybe not handled so well when we're working with trying to have product owners who maybe don't have the bandwidth or maybe not situated, or maybe we're starting to run into situations where it did work, but now things are starting to grow or the situations are changing and we're having to look at some scaling issues. Now, You saw in the if you saw the lead-in information or the advertising information, marketing information regarding this webinar, there was a statement in there talking about why you need to be serious about product ownership, to be serious about Agile. And hopefully, as what we've talked about so far, is starting to that should be becoming obvious. Is that if we don't have that role in place, we've got the what and when decisions not being handled at the appropriate level of responsibility and authority. We also have a situation in this case often is that we don't have a definitive customer voice. So if there's not that collaboration and that communication between the team and the product owner, we end up in a situation that's not that much unlike what we might be trying to get away from, which is a disconnect between business objectives and what's going on in the development area, which, by the way, is one of the #1 reasons that organizations report that they want to make a transition to Agile, is that they realize there's a disconnect there. And then if the product owner is not involved with what the team is doing and seeing what's actually rolling off the assembly line, as it were, and being involved in the sprint reviews, and collaborating in terms of answering questions as things start to emerge, then we can miss opportunities for adaptations that could be actually valuable to our customer and could fall into that realm of being things that we could do to maximize the return on investment. So when we're doing this, we miss out. We actually impair our ability to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of value, be it valuable software or valuable services or anything else. So we're all familiar with this. If you're signed up for this seminar, then you're probably have been in the situation where you understand how basic Scrum works. We have one product, one team, all co-located. Have a product owner co-located with the team, a Scrum Master there, and this works really well. And provided you have the appropriate organizational support, not really hard to pull this off. Once we get up and running on this for 2 or 3 sprints, we're usually experiencing success. Well, what happens though is that we run into a certain point sometimes where we start to slow down. So, and the concept of scaling comes up. So we run into this with in other areas as well. My computer might be slow because I've actually taxed it with some things that are demanding more resources than what it can handle. So I might increase the memory in my computer, or we might do some other things to try to be able to handle additional changes to our workload or to the nature of our work, and we know that what we have in place is not working. So that's when we start talking about scaling. And what I want to just talk about today is not a bunch of theoretical stuff, but just simply look at cases for scaling product ownership that come up frequently. So patterns that come up over and over and over again, and simply look at some things that organizations are doing that are working. And so hopefully this will be some food for thought, and one or two of these things might resonate with you and give you some ideas. So first of all, before we talk about scaling, just want to clarify a couple of terms. When people talk about scaling, they're talking about either scaling up or scaling out. Scaling up is simply adding more resources to a single node in the system. So that's the example there is with my computer. I've got one computer here. I need some more power, and I'll put some more memory in it. I got some more resources, and it's going to help this one computer actually get more done, be more productive. Scaling out is adding parallel nodes to a system. So the example there is I might want to have 4 or 5 machines that are working in parallel and load balancing between them. So when we have these server farms doing that sort of thing, that's when we're scaling out. Common challenges requiring scaling of the product owner. They, in my view, they really fall into 2 different camps. One is the need coming about as a result of organizational complexity, and the other one is comes about as the result of project or product complexity. So on the left side, organizational complexity, the 2 I want to look at today that fall into that category, and we won't come back to the categorization. This is just sort of kind of an organizational piece here to kind of give a little bit of separation between these different situations. But the two in organizational complexity, in my opinion, that we're going to look at today are going to be the remote product owner and a situation where we have shared services. Over on the right side, we have product and project complexity. Remote product owner is in there again, but that shouldn't be in there. So that's actually just a typo. So forget remote product owner there. But the three we're going to look at that fall into that category are going to be interdependent products, shared components, and where we simply have a complex product. So first of all, looking at the remote product owner, as the situation on the left indicates, we clearly have the product owner. That's the little guy with the briefcase and the tie, and he's up somewhere in the northwest U.S. And then we have down in South America somewhere, we have a group of that's where our development team is. So this might be, in the same country. It doesn't have to be offshore, but you guys get the idea. It could be across town. Could be in a different building on a very huge campus of buildings. But suffice it to say is that these folks aren't face-to-face. They aren't collaborating. So this becomes a problem because the product owner can become out of touch with what the team is doing, and vice versa. The team is not really in touch with what the product owner is thinking, and this can lead to a development versus business type of tension, and devolve into a handoff mindset, which again kind of takes us back to that situation where organizations are trying to resolve, which is business and development not being on the same page. So what has worked in this situation? It's very simple, and this is really a case of scaling up, which is to have an extension of the product owner resident with a team. What I've seen work really well with this is if the product owner is remote, and on top of that maybe traveling a lot, to have someone who's embedded with the team who is really an extension of that product owner. So a business analyst. It could even be just a member of the team on a rotating basis if we're not staffed to have analysts or have that parallel role there. Because we normally we're not given the option to go out and hire another person to be that. So we have to kind of we have to work with what we have. What is key to making this work is that whoever that extension is, even though the product owner might not be as available as we need him or her to be to the entire team, that person needs to be, the product owner needs to be available to that extension person. So we need to kind of have a hotline or a bat phone available so they can stay in contact if there are questions, because it's just when we're working in 2-week, 3-week sprints, it's waiting 2 or 3 days to get answers on things is just way too long. That extension person needs to also be able to speak to the team with the authority of the product owner. So the team doesn't need to have to wonder who do we really need to listen to here, because people pick up on that very quickly. If I know that one person's talking to me and the other person's going to come and override them, I'm just going to learn to ignore the first person, and we haven't really resolved anything there. Okay, so this pattern is not uncommon, and it tends to work very well. The second one is interdependent products. This could be products that are intentionally put into a suite, say Microsoft Office, other software bundles that work in a suite that are meant to actually complement one another. And it could be just a situation where we have a lot of products that we put out and they happen to interact with each other and their interdependencies. And this can be a problem. As you see on the left, we've got 3 different products. They're all linked to each other. We have individual product owners for each one of these products. But when we're working in this mode that we see on the left here, dependencies can remain hidden. So each of those product owners is going to be focused on his or her product. So we just may not be aware of dependencies there. One product can break another, therefore, because we don't know about dependencies. And it can be difficult to prioritize on a big picture basis. Again, I guess if I go back to Microsoft Office, if we have the Word folks and the Excel folks and the PowerPoint people and the Outlook people all working in their silos, and they're supposed to be launching something that works together, then they probably have a lot on their plates for their individual products, and we could end up having some issues if these things launch and they don't really interact together and don't work as seamlessly as they need to. So what has helped in this situation is to simply, we're effectively scaling out, but instead of adding a parallel node here, we're actually putting a node above this that makes these three nodes operate in parallel then. So to put a super product owner or an uber product owner above this can certainly help with this, to help have somebody there who is kind of managing the big picture and can help moderate or intervene or mediate when we have legitimate conflicts between them, because it can be difficult for folks who are down in the looking at their particular part of the world to back out and see the bigger picture. Also, some things that help with this are having joint strategic planning. So the road mapping and the release planning, the things that happen before we get into the sprint planning, to stay in a cadence of planning together as product owners, to make sure that everybody's aware of what everybody else has on their plate. Also having joint iteration reviews, so the sprint reviews at the end, and even if they're too big to have all together, at least if product A is having their review, make sure the folks from product B and product C are there, and so on and so forth, so that everybody's aware of not only what we're doing from a strategic level, but also as we progress through sprints, to be able for everybody to be aware of what these other products that they impact and that impact them, what's going on with those products. And then joint release reviews. We have the iteration reviews, which is part of the Scrum framework, but it's not uncommon to have release reviews, where if we're going to have a release, say, every 3 months, whether it's external or internal release, for the product owners to look at things from their perspective in terms of what's working, what's not working, and see the results that are coming out of this, and see adaptations they might need to make in terms of either product or the process and how they work together. Complex products is another one, and this is where we may have a product, so we're not talking about multiple products, but we have just a lot of stuff inside of a big product, and this tends to happen if our product happens to have grown by acquisition. We're incorporating different pieces of it, and we can end up with a lot of things kind of cobbled together there. Now everybody says what we work on is complex. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, everybody says that. So I know that everybody's work is complex. But what I'm talking about here is this situation where we really have a big product, and there's just too much in there for one product owner to get his or her head around. There can be too many domains inside of there, represented inside of that, maybe too broad a domain. And if it's really big, there could be just too many teams. There could be 20 teams in here that are working on this one thing. So the super product owner model helps here as well. So you see over on the right side, what we've done is we have effective product owners for different modules. I got one for module A, one for modules B and C, because they're kind of smaller and they're closely related. And then a separate one for module D. In this case, it's kind of big and spans the other ones. And then we're really treating this like interdependent products at that point. So the model looks the same on the right side, the same things we're talking about. The difference here is that since we're looking at one product, having the teams doing joint backlog estimation. So in other words, if they're doing planning poker, doing relative estimation, working all together at that level to do that high-level estimation, and then going away and doing their different things can help. And that helps for cohesiveness, for everybody knowing what everybody else is doing. And it can help some in terms of trying to have accurate projections in terms of velocity. We know that each one of those teams is going to have a different velocity, but if they're starting from the same basis, if they're all using the same estimation scale when they're working together, this can help as well. Shared components, you're just kind of seeing a pattern on the right side here. These are really all cases of scaling out. Shared components means that we may have say a framework that everybody uses, or there's one central set of processing logic that everybody draws upon. And if we have everybody just kind of working in that, so in other words, if product A, product B, and product C all own that jointly, then we could have too many people in there making conflicting changes if we don't have a team. And even if we do have a team to do this, and we're just considering only products A and products B and product C, then we can have too many consumers. In other words, product A, B, and C are the consumers of those components, and which can cause that components team to thrash back and forth between the needs of all these different products. And we end up having so much work in process at one time that nothing's really getting done, so nobody's getting what they need. Or maybe one product, because it has a product owner with a big stick, gets all of it, and the other ones suffer. we also may, and this thrashing can cause this components team to not be able to accommodate another team's need. In other words, I may expect, if I'm the product owner for product B, I might be planning something for 3 sprints from now. I may be assuming I'm going to be doing something, and I'm going to need something from the shared components team. If the shared components team is stretched and thrashing like that, I may not be able to keep that commitment because I may not have what I need from them. I see this question come up a lot. And so there's a very, very simple solution that works to this, and it's simply to consider that shared component team as a product. Those shared components as a product. And if you think about it, that's not really a stretch, because even though they don't, that team does not have external customers, they do have customers. Those customers just happen to be internal. In this case, product A, product B, and product C are all customers of that shared components team. So having a product owner, an effective product owner for the shared components team, and having them a backlog that they can manage, and kind of giving them a seat at the table, if you want to put it that way, with the other product owners, allows them all to be kind of on the same footing, where they're going to have to negotiate with each other and work with each other to get what they need done. Now, there's a super product owner here, and this says if needed. So it's not always necessary to put the super product on there. Sometimes just breaking out that shared components product owner there in parallel with the other ones is all that's needed. But the super product owner there is there primarily to be in that position, again, to maintain the big picture and also to help if there are limitations, there are constraints where we have to make decisions between what's most important. It may not be clear from an organizational standpoint or from a higher level between the product owners A, B, and C and the shared components product owner as to what might be most important if we can only do one thing and we've got 3 things that are trying to fit into the bucket. Shared services is similar, but it is a little bit different. We still have, you see the shared service in the middle on the left, and the 4 products that are kind of pulling and stretching on it there, pulling it in all different directions. We have a situation here where the shared service may not be producing a product or maybe even a component, but there is something that they do functionally in the organization, this group does, that is needed by these other organizations. So for an example might be a database administration team, maybe a very small team that has to meet everybody's needs. Or maybe there's a user experience design team that serves everybody. Again, same sort of problems here. Dependencies are being missed. We could have too many consumers needing things at once, just like we saw with the shared components. Again, the services team could be thrashing. The services team may not be able to accommodate another team's need. So this comes up, again, just like the shared components. It really comes up very frequently, this question, what do we do? Because we don't have enough of that shared, we don't have a DBA for every Scrum team. We don't have a shared components person for every team, so what do we do? So same pattern is repeated here. We are breaking out that shared services. Yes.
Hey, Lee, apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know that we've got about 5 minutes remaining in the presentation.
Okay.
And I wanted to remind all attendees to use the question panel on the right-hand side to ask any questions of Lee, and we'll try to get to those at the end of the presentation, which is in about 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, 5 minutes is perfect. We should be right on schedule. So the same pattern here is that we're going to break this shared service out as its own product, even though it's not a product per se. But it is something that we need to have visibility on. So really that's what we're talking about here. We're saying where we need to have visibility, where do we need to have a separate backlog maybe, and have the ability to have whoever is in charge of that to be able to negotiate with other folks. It's all about visibility and communication. So hopefully that's what's coming across here, is that we have visibility and communication as well as somebody who's responsible in that case. Because if you're looking at products A, B, C, and D, we can't have that shared services team getting beaten up by those 4 different teams. There's got to be some more order than that. Otherwise, it's going to be a big political battle, which is the case often. So splitting the shared services out and looking at it as a product, and then we have the super product owner or the Uber product owner here on an if needed basis, and that's going to be there's no there's no always or never rule on that. That's going to be certainly situation or organization dependent. I want to say a few words about release planning, and that's really just because of some things that I've run into this year, and I see that it seems to have come in just a boatload of these situations this year, where organizations are looking at this diagram here, what you see, which is the typical Scrum diagram, and you notice it goes from product backlog directly to sprint backlog, and so product owners and organizations have been struggling with this. Because the product backlog is huge and it's very dynamic, and it really doesn't have time constraints around it, and organizations are trying to go directly from the product backlog to the sprint backlog, which is very short. We're talking about this is something that's going to be 2 or 3 weeks in length, and it definitely has a fixed scope and fixed dates around it. And so it's just too much. It's too much of a transition, too abrupt. And also, when we're trying to go from product backlog to sprint backlog, if the organization is asking what's going to be done in the next, what are we doing 2 months from now? What are we planning on doing 2 months or a month from now? It's the wrong answer to say, well, we can only tell you what we're doing 2 weeks from now. So introducing the concept of release planning is something that has just this alone has just been like a breath of fresh air for many organizations. And really all we're doing here is we're saying, you know what, instead of going directly from product planning to sprint planning, we're going to have an intermediate planning mechanism here called the release. Now, whether it's actually something that we're going to release to our end customer, or it's going to be an internal release, it really is if you can think of it in terms of project planning, a very short-term project, maybe 2-3 months, where we're taking a subset, and as the diagram indicates here, it allows us to look at something that's a little bit smaller, more targeted, we can get our heads around. It's bigger than the iteration backlog, a little bit more dynamic than the iteration backlog, but it's not nearly as big as the product backlog, and it doesn't have that very dynamic, very fluid nature of the product backlog. Benefits of the release cadence simply allows us to be able to get our heads around things and to have some planned inspection, adaptation, and coordination points. So this can help us in terms of scaling product ownership. Again, right, if we have multiple product owners, especially in this parallel scaling where we're scaling out, we want to have communication as we go along, but we also want to make sure that we have some defined points where we can coordinate. So these release reviews really come in handy. We talked about having the review at the end of the release. So having the releases established, that gives us that coordination and adaptation point there. Adaptation point. This is just an example of rolling wave release planning, and all we're trying to indicate here is that if I'm working on release 10.1, I don't have to wait until the end of July to start thinking about 10.3. We're always thinking about it, always planning. And so this goes along with the notion of the ongoing kind of slow drip planning that we have in Agile. It's ongoing, it's all the time, but we're always looking forward and kind of making adjustments as we go based on the feedback we get, not only from our process, but also from the world around us and from things that might be going on in terms of internal stakeholders in the organization. So finally, to recap here, I just wanted to make sure that we understand the product owner role and why it's important, and then make sure that if we're having issues in that area, sit back and think, do we have the right people there, and are we supporting it? If we're going to have a product owner role, are we actually situated such that the folks have the bandwidth to do that? And then be honest where it's not happening, and then make adjustments as necessary. When we're making the adjustments, just make sure we use common sense, and that really applies to everything. We don't have to get real fancy with it. We don't have to overthink it. We can simply ask ourselves, what structure is going to best result in us being able to deliver value that actually works, so valuable stuff that works to our customer frequently, and also maximize the return on investment. So that implies we're going to be doing things that we're going to be prioritizing so that we're not doing work that's non-value. And then lastly here, want to make sure that when we're scaling, not to let that slip and devolve into product ownership by committee. We have to make sure that the buck stops somewhere, so that we're able to communicate that way. Because again, if we have too many cooks in the kitchen in terms of prioritization, decision making. We end up with everybody owning it, and then often nobody owning it, and we're kind of back where we were. That's all I had to push out your way. Questions and comments. If you have any questions, I believe what we want to do is use the GoToWebinar control panel and ask questions there. And I'll be here for a few minutes to ask those.
Yeah, thanks, Lee.
Okay.
Great presentation, and we've already received a number of good questions. As Lee said, please continue to use the questions area on your control panel to ask questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can here in the next 15 minutes. So the first question, Lee, is there a certified product owner certification available? And if so, can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, there is. The Scrum Alliance, which also does the Certified Scrum Master, they have a certified certified Scrum Product Owner course, which is very similar to the CSM in that it's a 2-day course. You have to attend it on site, and at the end of it, you have your requisite knowledge. So you cover a lot of these principles in there. There are also non-certified courses as well, and they're normally less expensive. So unless you just need to have or want to have the Certified Scrum Product Owner, you can also take some other courses and maybe some things that zero in on some specific things. So if there's some parts of what the product owner responsibilities are, like the backlog management, story writing, planning, that sort of thing, you can pick up some more targeted courses to go along with that.
Okay, thanks, Lee.
Okay.
So the next question was, don't you think it's better to say the product owner has autonomy than say he has authority, and what's the difference?
Well, autonomy means that I can act, and I've been empowered to make decisions without having to clear every decision with somebody. That's the way I look at it. So in other words, I've got some freedom. Authority means that I can make decisions, and those are going to be to one extent or another, going to be binding decisions. Product owner really has both of those, so I wouldn't say it's one versus the other. The product owner role has autonomy and does also have authority to do this. Now, contrast that with the Scrum Master. One of the things we always say about the Scrum Master is the Scrum Master has no authority. So the Scrum Master certainly has autonomy, but no authority. So the Scrum Master is a facilitative, servant leader type of role, where really the power really rests with the team. If we're talking about Scrum, product owner has more authority than this, because the product owner has the ability to say, here's what needs to be done, and here's the order, and here's the priority in which we need to do this.
Okay, thanks, Lee. So next question, can you differentiate product owner and the business process owner, and do they coexist well in the same person?
Yeah, so in that one, I would have to, if we were face to face and we could talk, I would ask a follow-up question, which would be I would be asking you to tell me more about what the business process owner does. What is that role? What is that person's responsibilities? Because that role could be different. That title, in other words, could have different responsibilities in different organizations. But the role of the product owner, again, is focused on maximizing return on investment for a particular product. And the process, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the process that is in an organization should be supportive of that. So they may not, you could have two different people. They could be the same person. I think a lot of that's going to have to do with maybe the size of the organization and whether or not the organization is whole hog Agile, or whether we've got Agile, sort of Agile enclaves within the larger organization. In that case, the business process manager is probably going to be not resident within any individual team. Although I don't see it incompatible. Those two roles incompatible. In fact, that actually is a good place to be, probably, because in order to attain the goals of the product owner, you're going to have good business processes in place. So if they aren't the same person, it certainly would be beneficial to have those two roles really working well and collaborating together.
Thanks, Lee. We're getting a lot of good questions in here, and I encourage you to continue to use the questions area of the control panel. So here's our next one. When setting the expectation that the product owner is continuously or regularly available, Does someone filter updates and questions for the product owner, or does the product owner need a level of detailed knowledge similar to a project manager?
Yeah, so I would say that the product owner needs to be involved in what's going on. So I mentioned earlier that the expectation is that product owner is involved in the daily stand-ups. So certainly get information out of that. And also in an Agile context, we don't need a whole lot of metrics tracking. We don't have to go into databases and have a lot of key performance indicators and then try to extrapolate from that where we are. We have some very easy to read and easy to understand information radiators, burn downs, task boards, those sorts of things. So there's not a lot of filtering that has to happen, because what we're doing is on a daily basis and really on a continuous basis, we're being very transparent about what's going on as impediments actually manifest themselves. We're finding out about them and we're taking action on them immediately. So there's not the need really to have a hierarchy of information being passed up, because the expectation is the product owner is going to be involved with that and really part of the team.
Okay, we have time, Lee, for probably about 3 more questions.
Okay.
So have you seen issues with the product marketing manager and product owner being 2 different people? If so, how can conflicts or scaling issues be avoided in that situation?
Yeah, so that's another one of those things where it's kind of a loaded question, and I would ask you over a cup of coffee. So tell me what your product marketing manager does, and then we could look at compare and contrast. So probably difficult to answer that definitively. If we're talking about the organizations that I'm familiar with, if the marketing manager understands what we're doing, and this I may take this opportunity also to say, if we're trying to do this and we really want to be effective, have as many people in the organization understanding what this is all about, understanding what Agile is about, from your HR folks to your person who answers the phone. It's very important to be on the same page. So I think that there could be conflict. There could be conflict if you have one part of the organization that wants to go Agile and maybe the marketing group says, no, we have some other way we want to approach this. But I don't think the 2 are mutually exclusive. So I'm going to have to kind of tap dance on this one and say it depends. I don't think there's a natural disconnect, and I don't think there has to be any conflict between the 2.
Excellent. So in a situation where you have developers sitting on multiple teams or projects, would you say a good practice would be to have a single super product owner that prioritizes for all the teams?
Well, we're kind of talking about 2 different things here. So there are people who are split up across multiple teams and maybe multiple products. And then there's the product owner. The product owner should be associated with a product, right? So as we looked at in the diagrams, I've either got product A, B, or C, and D, or maybe we've got some logical products in there if we've got this big complex thing. So the product owner should be, whether or not we have a super product owner, I think is going to depend on whether or not we have grown to the size where our product owners are not able to see the big picture, and they're not maybe to have an alignment with each other, and or we need this sort of governing a product owner to help resolve where we have some natural conflicts there, either by our organizational structure or by our architecture. So that really doesn't really have an effect on team members. If the team members are going to be on different products, then we'll have a product owner per product, and they'll just be working on according to and collaborating with the product owner for the product which they happen to be working on. So if I happen to be working on 3 products at the same time, that's probably not a good situation, because I'm probably not being as productive as it might look like on paper, but that simply means I'm going to have interaction with 3 different product owners.
Thank you, Lee. This will be our last question.
Okay.
So when forecasting, how detailed should a product owner be with release planning at the theme, epic, or story level? If stories have not been estimated more than 1 release out, how do you practice release planning?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So when we're doing release planning, we can, if we're doing velocity-based planning at the sprint level, then in our release planning, if we know how many sprints we're going to have, for instance, so if I know I'm going to get 20 story points a sprint and I've got 5 sprints in a release, then that number stabilized. Then for planning purposes, I could project probably, in our case here, 100 story points is how much I can get done in a particular release. So it comes down to actually, we can't really figure out what's going to go in release until we get some estimation on it. So the wisdom here, the conventional wisdom here, is that as things get closer to being implemented, we're going to have to estimate them. It's impossible to know if something's going to be right-sized for a sprint and by extension for a release until we size it. So putting things in your process to allow you to stay ahead of that sizing can really help. I know there's a lot of organizations that try to do epic sizing and then try to measure and try to project from that, and I think that can be dangerous because that's not really the level at which we measure and the level at which we actually do the work. So a lot of different schools of thought on that. My preferred way of doing this is to constantly be doing estimation. Instead of having big estimation meetings once a quarter or once at the beginning of the release, is to carve out an hour and a half, whatever, a week, every week, and we just cadence that like we would do a daily stand-up. Just do it once a week where the team is actually going to be working down the product backlog and simply go down the backlog in terms of priority order and start with the first one that hasn't been estimated, do as many as we can get done in an hour, and then go away and then come back. And what happens then is if you've already got enough for one release, then what you're doing then is you're kind of working on the next one, and you've always got enough in the pipeline, so you don't get behind on the estimation. That is, I've done that with multiple teams, and have talked to other folks who've done the same thing, and that seems to work well. There's some other things out there floating around, like the rapid estimation, where people just put numbers on it, do it really quickly. Pros and cons to that. So your mileage is going to vary. But I know I've said a lot here, but what I would say is I'm not convinced that epic estimation translates very well into reliable projections in terms of getting backlog items done and knowing what velocity is really going to be.
Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you.
This concludes our presentation. I'd like to thank Lee Cunningham, our presenter today, and the many attendees that attended this AgileLIVE webinar titled Scaling Product Ownership. I'd like to remind you that we will email you a copy, actually a recording of the webinar here in about a few days' time. Once again, thank you for attending, and have a great day.